all black everything, all black, you know, all black in the name of all my black heroes, all black everything, all black polos, all black medallions, yeah, all black, yo.
Welcome to Left to Black. I'm your host, Anthony Neal. We are coming to you today from the From Slavery to Freedom lab at the Franklin Humanities Institute here at Duke University, and we are joined by Professor Tracy Denean Sharpley-Whiting, who is, among other things, the Vice Provost of the Arts and Libraries at Vanderbilt University, where she is also the Gertrude Conway Vanderbilt Distinguished Chair in the Humanities, Professor of African American and Diaspora Studies, Professor of French, and Director of the Catley House Research Center for the Study of Global Black Cultures and Politics. Among her publications, Frantz Fanon, Conflicts and Feminisms, University of Virginia, 1998, Black Venus, Sexualized Savages, Primal Fears, and Primitive Narratives in French, published by Duke in 1999, Negritude Women, published by Minnesota in 2002, Pimps Up, Hoes Down, published by NYU in 2007, and Bricktops, Paris, African American Women in Paris Between the Two World Wars, and the autobiography of Adia Bricktop Smith, or Miss Baker Regrets, published by SUNY Press in 2015. How are you doing?
I'm good, and thank you for having me. Finally, right?
Finally, I mean, we have been friends for a long time.
Very long time.
Almost 20 years.
I
So
know.
it's great to have you here at Duke.
Thank you.
I remembered one earlier time when you came here.
Well, first time you invited me.
Right, in 2006, and this is great photo that they took of us up top, and we're looking up like we're like working CSI or,
Yes, it was
or
true.
something along those lines.
We were about to go and investigate some folks. Yeah. That was a great photo, actually.
Yes. How are you doing?
I'm very, very well. I mean, I'm loving the new position, loving the work. So, yeah, I'm good, and it's good to be back.
So let me ask you this. Working in this position now as Vice Provost of the Arts and Libraries, how has it been for you to make that transition, right? And you've been doing administration for a while because you ran African American Studies and Diaspora Studies at Vanderbilt for a long time. Mm-hmm. How has it been making this transition and still being able to do work? I mean, because you are a prolific scholar.
I have to say that this is probably one of the best administrative transitions that, certainly in my experiences that I've had, it was seamless because naturally as scholars, we use libraries, we use archives.
Yeah.
And the arts, of course, we engage in the arts on all sorts of levels, whether we're doing biographies of folks or whether we're looking at a particular kind of work and the way it might have impacted various movements, whether when we're doing hip hop, which is an art form, right? We're engaging. So for me, there was a natural synergy between the two. Now, of course, under the arts, I'm over the Vanderbilt University Press, the Fine Arts Galleries, as well as the Curb Center for Art, Enterprise and Public Policy, in addition to trying to craft a university art strategy. Okay. So meeting with various faculty across the arts to try and do that. It's been fabulous and exciting, and certainly I, went from maybe a staff and faculty of, collectively, 11, 12 folk to, now close to 200, but it's been wonderful and intellectually rewarding and engaging, and has actually helped fuel my work even more because of the space that you're operating in, libraries, and art. And my latest work, of course, evolves around a woman who is a librarian and engaged in the arts. So that for me was, again, a kind of perfect matching up. And so I like to think, some of the things I do with the libraries now, like we just staged an exhibit, was kind of like my love letter to the libraries, because I think that they're so fundamental in what we do. They are fundamental to what we do, and so underrated and underappreciated. But yeah, the transition to this part of administration was not difficult. I still managed to keep my faculty appointment, so I'm 50%. I didn't go full 100%.
Are you still teaching?
Occasionally. So it's like, I would every other year,
Okay.
a class, I have to say though, and of course the classes can kind of match up to what it is you might be working on. So that's not really, you've got the help
Right.
for that. So that was important. So yeah, I'm still teaching and the work is still, I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
And so, and again, I think it's the creative thing that helps kind of propel the work, being able to go to various, art fairs and festivals such as our Basel, our, 154. Which is, one of those ones that's about all the art coming from the African continent.
Yeah.
So, this is exciting stuff, and it's very new for me, and it's a new position at Vanderbilt. So it's an inaugural position. So I'm very excited about it.
Talk a little bit about the arc of your career.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm just reading off the books and the kind of work, I mean, early book on Fanon,
Mm-hmm.
mid-career or early career book on hip hop. Now the French piece with Bricktop, right? And now this librarian that we'll talk about, a little bit later. How would you define or describe the arc of your career?
I think again, there's incredible synergy because initially, I wouldn't say all of my work really dealt with women because even with the Fanon book, although it was about Fanon, it was about
feminism,
women.
Right.
And so, and I always married the French with the African American or African diasporic. The only one that I did not really do that with was the hip hop book, right? That was very centrally American. Yeah. So I guess I would say that I've always found that the works speak to one another in interesting ways. And so even though the book was American centric, that particular book, it still talked about Black women. It still talked about feminism. It still talked about culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think, and again, the administrative track kind of came early for me, immediately post tenure when I was chairing the French department at Purdue. That was my first job, and then moved to a small liberal arts college, Hamilton College, and then to Vanderbilt. So, and then I sat in Black Studies for a very long time, directing or becoming a chair,
right?
Which for me was phenomenal, right? And it's a catbird seat. I think when people think about administrative positions that I think prepare you for larger administration, there's something about being in Black Studies where you're touching so many parts of the institution. And seeing so many of you need to know, those things about how does one get tenure in English or if you got a professor in sociology or whatever.
Because it's interdisciplinary.
That's right. We have to be versed in all of that. And so for me, it actually prepared, I think it's a wonderful stepping stone to so many, other parts of the institution. Yeah. So for me, it's been an interesting intellectual arc that has tracked along with the administrative one.
Do you think that your work has always been legible in Black Studies?
That's interesting. I think so. I'd like to think so. Mm-hmm. I think though the funny thing is that given that my PhD is actually in French studies, right, from Brown.
Right.
But I taught also as a graduate student in African American studies. It was very important to me to make sure that I made the work legible, and even the work on Fanon. I mean, it was diasporic, right? And so a lot of us are doing diaspora studies before diaspora studies was, called diaspora studies, if you will, right? I think one of the first PhD programs, though, was at University of Minnesota. But even that was called something like the history of Black people. It wasn't called diaspora studies.
Right.
So I do think that it has been legible for those who have understood Black studies or African American studies even as a space that was very expansive and capacious and could accommodate all of that.
Belle da Costa Greene. And you mentioned, your new position as Vice President of the Arts has allowed you to do an exhibition. So you are in fact doing an exhibition on Belle at this moment. Talk a little bit about who this figure is and why she fascinates you and your work so much at this point in time.
I have to say, I came across Belle. I'm working on a collection of essays, and it's called Men I'd Like to Have Known and the One Woman I'd Like to Have Met. And she's the one woman I'd like to have met. What is fascinating about her, so 1879, she's born. And so she's born into this colored elite. And so when many are attempting to figure out how did she become Belle da Costa Greene? Well, she was from a very intellectual family, right? She was shaped in the crucible of the colored elite. It was not white society that gave form to Belle. It was actually black folk. In 1896, this is about the time when the family decides to pass. When she thinks that this is the best, moment. Why? Because of course, Plessy v. Ferguson, right? And so they don't want to get trapped on the other side of the color line. Genevieve wants her family to have the same opportunities that other families have had, her children to have those opportunities. It's understandable why she would have opted to pass. And with that, though, but it was an open secret kind of with Belle because she was, she looked black to most white Americans. When I took on this position, I was particularly interested in reading up about the future of libraries as well as the future of museums. And so I was doing a lot of reading and I just happened to come across her. And then, of course, as you begin to dig more, what I discovered, there's a couple of novels out about Belle. And of course, there is, Heidi, I think it's Artisan's book on Belle. It's called An Illuminated Life. Mm-hmm. And that came out in 2007. But of course, that, as I was just, again, going through, discovering this librarian, hinting at whatever. Then I, of course, read the work on J.P. Morgan by Gene Strauss, and bam, there it was, that Belle da Costa Greene was a black woman, right? She is the first to have run up on her birth certificate, the original birth certificate, which has her father and her mother as, black or colored, as we were called, then Negro, whatever. And so it was like, whoa, and then, of course, the novels and stuff took off of that. What I found, so in my position, for me, there was a clear connection with Belle, given that she also was working in libraries. She's a librarian. I'm not a librarian, but certainly, libraries are our life, our lifeblood, and and stores, archives, et cetera. And she was also, into the arts, right? She, mm-hmm. because J.P. Morgan was such an acquisitive, a voracious kind of buyer of art. And so she had to get up to speed in order to kind of help him, buy the best works, right? What was important and da-da-da. So for me, wow, I mean, could there have been a better person to read about? A woman who's passing, for most of her life since she was 17. Her background, father is Harvard educated, first, black graduate out of Harvard College. The mother, is an accomplished, musician, a pianist. She's from the colored elite out of DC on that side of the family. So why does this woman pass, right? And so trying to get to underneath that and also looking at all of her accomplishments and what that meant for the Morgan, what that meant for art, what that meant for libraries. And so, yeah, I thought that, she would make a fabulous study if there, because I had written so much on women, I decided I was going to do a book just on men. But then I was like, oh no, we got to have, I couldn't pass her up. And then it was like, okay, can I find a catchy enough, title, that would encompass, this. And so, yeah, she would be the one woman I'd like to have met.
You've mentioned that part of your new position is overseeing libraries. Librarians are in a very different kind of moment now nationally. I think there's a way in which university librarians have been protected, given some of the politics that are happening. How are you looking at the dynamics of what's happening politically now in terms of the attacks on libraries, librarians, the attacks on public education, particularly around the teaching of racial issues and Black studies in particular? How are you processing that, both as a scholar, a Black studies scholar, but as someone who's positioned as you are at a university like Vanderbilt to give witness to what's happening?
Right, and specifically, like you said, from the library perspective, as well as from the arts, right? Because in many respects, art pushes us, right, in different sorts of ways, and pushes us to think critically about certain things. So in many, it's doing the kind of work that people are resistant to now. And because the arts are also now thinking about issues of access and equity, it's pushing art in different sorts of ways that Black folks and other, folks of color have always been pushing these boundaries, but now they find themselves also in institutions that might have kept them out before, right? We also have curatorial programs that are now cropping up when we recognize statistically that, Black curators represent 4%, of curators. And so, there's this, kind of recognition of those challenges. And for libraries, of course, that are perpetually underfunded and feel like they're under attack because they are under attack. And they're the easiest to kind of get at, whether they're public or private, but particularly in states, publicly funded institutions, one can find their mission to make knowledge available. And their recognition as important academic structures versus just, sites where people just do the work for, you're there just to service faculty and students. Libraries themselves are specialized, in certain areas. Many have PhDs. And so these are very smart people. And I don't think people sometimes recognize that. They do think, oh, just hand me the book. And it's just like, oh my gosh, there's just so much that went into that. And also the fact that, oftentimes one's own librarian has to be so versed in these things to bring you things like, isn't this important? Wouldn't you like us to acquire this? These are going to be the kind of challenges I feel particularly, I think in private institutions, you are shielded in certain ways, but the public librarians are not. And I think we need to think about the artists and the libraries, and we need to make sure that they are protected. That their freedom, their academic freedom, freedoms are not impinged upon. Their artistic freedoms are not impinged upon in this moment that's attempting to repress certain narratives. I was stunned just to think about the idea that some parent was upset with the screening, of
Ruby Bridges, a Disney film.
A Disney film.
The Disney movie tells the story of Ruby Bridges, the 6-year-old first grader who became the target of hatred and racism when she integrated an all-white elementary school in New Orleans in 1960. It is now the latest flashpoint over instructional materials as the state of Florida limits how lessons on race, sexuality, and gender are taught in the classroom.
It have some heroic, white characters, because nobody ever wants to go to a film and just have all the white characters be awful and bad, right? You want some that have, they're capable of being redeemed. And so, but, because they don't want the children's feelings being hurt or them to think that, white people hate Black people. I think that was the parents' concern. And it's kind of like, wow, if they live through it, you can watch it. And so that's, those are the kinds of things that I think are scary when you think about it. And Florida, and Ohio, which is, following right behind them with this. And I think we'll see a lot more in various states. And so where will people stand, with respect to that sort of freedom and access? It's like, your freedom stops where, mine begins. You don't get to impose. You can't talk about freedom and you're attempting to impose certain things on my child's learning or my learning or my access. You can simply not do it. Don't go, don't read, don't look. But now you're attempting to dictate something for all Americans or all those in your state. And that's highly problematic. And so, what we need to do is make sure that we stand with those who are under assault.
Are you comfortable where Black Studies is now?
Oh, wow.
Because I think about it in different ways. The early mission of Black Studies, which was so connected to community, there was just a presence there. The growth of the field, both in terms of the number of scholars, but the quality of the scholarship, We come up right after this explosion of folks. And folks, for lack of a better way to describe it, are eating well in Black Studies these days, If we look at particularly some of the more established and elite institutions. But do you think it's still connected to that early mission? And should it be connected to that early mission?
I mean, I do think that it is if they're in certain spaces, right? When I think of like a sala, right? That has a very strong connection still to community, and you have people from the community coming to those conferences.
And the only places where you really see PWI and HBCU scholars in the same space, along with undergraduate students.
Exactly.
Right.
And also, dependent on the cities, you will also see much more connection to community, right? Like in Chicago, you're going to see a very active participation of community in those spaces. So, yeah, am I comfortable with? I think certainly Black Studies has, to some extent, arrived in certain spaces as legitimate, but I do think that we still are knocking our heads up against. Having to argue for certain lines or making, in a way in which all departments are now in this era in which people are, forcing you to justify this and cut
particularly
back on
in the humanities.
The humanities, but I mean, even the social scientists are also, not happy about, and they're very important to what we do.
Right.
And, are not happy about how they have been under siege or underfunded and whatever, because there's a push, I think, overall towards STEM. Versus people really thinking again about what does a liberal arts education look like, and where are we situated in that? Whether we're humanities or whether we're social science, where we're in Black Studies, or whether we're in English or in connecting to Black Studies, or French and connecting to Black Studies. The point is that what I think our institutions now need to do is clearly articulate what a liberal arts education means, not just critical thinking. Like that's always been our fallback. Well, we're there to It has to be, unfortunately, more than that, because what we are up against is ideas about return on investment, and and things of that nature. And so, unfortunately, I think we're going to be in this spot, even in Black Studies, with others trying to consistently justify why we are in existence, because now people are questioning what is the purpose of a college degree, and that impacts all of us. So,
outside of the work that you're doing in terms of your research, what are you reading these days?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so.
This apparently was the money question.
Yeah, I know, seriously, because I'm on the I'm one of the judges for the National Book Award. So it is, I'm doing the books in translation.
Okay.
Whoa, am I reading so many different books, right? And so you can receive, up to, I think the number is anywhere from 150 to 600 books.
Oh, wow.
And so I have been doing, so we're just getting going, but I have been reading quite broadly. And it's been fabulous because, if it were up to me, I would just, read what I'm reading to do my research.
Right.
But this is like, actually, you always wonder like, man, I would really love to just be able to read this novel and whatever. But that is my task now. And so they've actually, given me space to do that.
Okay.
Without feeling guilty at all that I'm not, working on this, that, and the other. I'm actually doing a service. So yeah, I'm excited. So I'm not supposed to necessarily talk about the books.
Got it.
So because if your book isn't selected, you don't want to, I don't want you to come after me. But the point is I'm reading from, whether it's a book from something by a Turkish author, or whether it's a book by an author from Colombia. It's been, mind-blowing and wonderful and enriching in a way in which I couldn't have even imagined.
Yeah. You made a tactical decision in your career when many of our colleagues decided they were going to go social and have a presence on social media. You have chosen not to be hyper-present, in that space. You still think that was a good decision for you?
Yeah, because my personality is I'm probably a lot more introverted than people are aware.
Okay.
And so and also, I needed to kind of do my work.
Yeah.
And do my work the way I wanted to. Now, some people can do their work and still do whatever,
right.
and I applaud them, but I know the kind of, person I am. I like to, I love to travel. I love to do these other things. And so anything that was going to kind of, if it forced me to have to constantly be present in those spaces,
Got it.
I just couldn't take that on. And I'm going to be really honest with you. I made a concerted decision to be, to not necessarily engage in a lot of different things once I became a mother in 2002.
Yeah.
And that included administrative kind of opportunities that when I landed at Vanderbilt in 2004 and have been there for a while, when there would be opportunities that might arise, I really wanted to, that's not where I wanted to be. So no, I haven't regretted the decision at all. And those who've been wonderful and successful, incorporating it and doing it, I'm very, very happy for them.
But you raise an important point, I think, based on the choices that you've made. Do you think the Academy is any better at accommodating motherhood or parenthood, if we're going to be quite specific? Has it done any better in terms of accommodating parenthood, in the space in a way that is productive for us to still remain great scholars and teachers, but also helpful for us being able to raise our families?
I think from where I sit, it was very accommodating because we both were academics, and so you could kind of arrange, your schedule in a certain kind of way. It's not always that way for everyone, and I recognize that. And I do, applaud our institution for introducing, a 12 weeks paid family leave. That wasn't always the case. And that was, of course, in response to the decisions around Roe.
Right.
I think, and there have been other kind of concessions and understandings around parenthood and, and whatnot, that my institution, and I'm sure other institutions have followed suit or were already leading the way, who knows, around parenthood and how to make that more, certainly make the work environment, make work life a bit more, the balance, recognizing that there needed to be a balance. I would probably say on the whole, academe is much more accommodating, I think, than other spaces could be and should be. But if I were a staff member, I might not feel the same way. Right. That I probably would need more time, and I would need, and it's just a different rhythm. And so I do think professors are in a different kind of, or are positioned differently. That's, again, been my experience, but I have read across experiences when it's not so. Yeah. And we need to make sure that it is an equitable experience at our institution for everyone who decides that they want to become parents.
Yeah. If there was one regret you've had in your career, right, because we're fortunate now to be able to look at a long,
unfortunately,
long arc of a career.
And unfortunately,
right?
For great years.
Is there any regret that you have in your career?
Wow. No.
Yes.
No. I think I've done exactly what I wanted to do. And probably, and didn't imagine certain things that I've done when I started out. So I've probably exceeded what it is I thought that I was going to do. For me, when I started out, I wanted to simply write, to do the work, right? And to be recognized for the work, right? Because, I'd be lying if I would say, oh, I just did it for myself. We did it for our peers, we did, whatever. Have there been times when I thought, oh, if I wasn't, such a whatever, I probably could have done this book as trade. Right. So that has occasionally crossed my mind, but I've decided, no, that again was not that's not what I wanted to do. And some people are great, at doing that, and it's just that's not what I wanted to do. And so I made certain choices. So yeah, I think I am what I wish that I had taken I wish I had a little bit more time to do though, I would probably like to write more mysteries. And so I've done, 3, and one of them was a part of the Bricktops.
Talk a little bit about that, some folks might describe it as a side hustle, but it's more than that for you.
Yeah, for me, it's really just about, it was an outlet, and with the Bricktops Paris book, writing that second part, the autobiography of Ada Bricktop Smith, whatever, or Miss Baker Regrets. Wow, for me, that was kind of, I couldn't let go, of them. And so I wanted to keep writing, and it was perfect, as a reader of like Walter Mosley. Yeah. I used to just, go through every book that he's published, from the Easy Rollins series to the others, just constantly. And even one of my favorites was The Emperor of Ocean Park, Stephen Carter's work. Right. Oh, it was, and then when you kind of go back and you look at all these, these Black writers who were doing, who was doing, mystery, and the source and the various sources. And that's the one thing that I wish that that's one area that I wish that I had explored even more. And now you just don't have the time. And so I did the other ones. They were shorter, kind of cozies, a little bit more risque than certain cozies. But I wish I had more time. Yeah, because I would love to be just churning out. And that is an absolute gift. When I look at these writers, also reading these other books in translation, and some of these writers have been writing for years. Yeah. And you're like, what creative genius and energy it takes, because when you are writing, even when you're doing genre fiction, if you want to get it right, you are doing a lot of research. Right. You want to make sure that you got the right address, and that you got the history, you got so it is incredible. The kind of work, the appreciation I have for writers is just incredible. And so I wish that I could have gone down that lane a little bit more. Yeah.
We've been joined today by Professor Tracy Denean Sharpley-Whiting, who is, among other things, the Vice Provost for the Arts and Libraries at Vanderbilt University. She joined us here today in the From Slavery to Freedom Lab here at the John Hope Franklin Humanities Institute. Thank you, old friend.
Thank you for having me.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts, and every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything black, culture over everything, y'all. We taking it back, black.